This is review lesson 3 on fractions, percents, and decimals. So mostly we'll just be going through a couple of examples, but you'll read this kind of left to right in terms of a description and then an example beside it. So the first thing is always to remember that you need to be reducing your fractions to lowest terms. So again, this should all be review, so just bear with me as we go through and make sure that you have it fresh in your head. So the first operation is adding and subtracting fractions. So to do this, we need to find a common denominator, multiply each numerator by the same number you multiply each denominator by to get the common denominator. Okay, then we're going to add or subtract only the numerators. Okay, so the first thing we need to do here is figure out that common denominator. So most times the easiest way to do this is just going to be to multiply those denominators together. So we'll have 3 times 4, which gives us a denominator of 12. So now we need to figure out what we need to multiply by to write each of those over 12. So to get from 4 to 12, we are going to need to multiply this whole fraction by 3. And to get from 3 to 12, we're going to have to multiply this whole fraction by 4. So then we just go ahead and do that. So our 2 times 4 is 8. And 4 times 3 is going to be 12. Sorry, that's an equal sign. Minus 3 times 3 is 9 over 4 times 3 is 12. And then it says our next step is we're just going to leave the denominator the same, and we are going to carry out a subtraction up here. So 8 minus 9 is going to give us negative 1 over 12, and that is already written in lowest terms. So that's adding and subtracting. Now let's take a look at multiplying. I'll try my best to fit these examples in these boxes provided. So when we're multiplying, this is kind of the easiest operation with fractions. All we really need to do is multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators. So literally 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. And negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. And then just remembering here to reduce to lowest term. So because this is a negative number over a negative number, we're going to have a positive outcome. So we can divide by 2. Negative 2 divided by 2 is going to give me 1. And 12 divided by 2 is 6. So that's now written in lowest terms there. Okay, dividing fractions, pretty easy again. All we have to do is flip the second fraction and multiply them together. Okay, so literally you're just going to change the numerator and the denominator and multiply. So I'll try my best to fit this. So the first fraction is just going to stay the same. Now we're changing to multiplication and we're flipping that fraction. So you might want to just leave, well, we'll just see. We'll move the negative to the bottom. So negative 3 on the bottom, 4 up top, and now we're just multiplying. So we can go back up and look at this one here and see that all we have to do is multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. And 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Okay, so that's a negative over a negative. So that means that this is actually just 8 over 15. Okay, and we're done. So those are the operations with fractions. Again, that should have been review. So if you have any other questions, make sure you're asking. Oops. So that we can get that sorted out for you. All right. So now moving on to our conversions. So the first thing we're going to look at is converting a fraction to a decimal. And I want to point out that these descriptions are not the most clear, honestly. So you might just know this in your head and not really like have to kind of follow these steps, but for those of you who struggle with this a little, I'm hoping that it might be helpful. So when we're going from a fraction to a decimal, we need to find a number you multiply the denominator by to make it a power of 10. Okay, so we need it to be written over 10, basically. Okay, we're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by that number, then write down just the numerator, replacing the decimal one space from the right for every zero in the denominator. So see what I mean? That's kind of wordy. It's really not that hard. So basically we need to figure out how to write 3 over 25 as a number over 100. Okay, well I know that 25 times 4 gives me 100. So all I need to do is multiply this fraction by 4. Okay, that means I'm multiplying the numerator by 4 and the denominator by 4. So 3 times 4 is 12, and 25 times 4 is 100. So now we have this written over 100. So remember, a decimal is actually just however many parts of a whole, and that whole is 100. So we can simply just write the numerator like it says. So we're going to write 12. Okay, and it says placing the decimal one spot from the right for every zero. So the decimal, obviously, of 12 starts all the way, I'll just write it in here, starts here, and we need to move it over to the left for however many zeros are on the bottom. So this is over 100, so we're going to move it over 2 spots. So now we have 0.12. Okay, so now we've converted that fraction to a decimal. 3 over 25 is actually just 0.12. Okay, so looking at this next one, this next example, 23 over 1,000, that's already written over a power of 10 for us, right? So we can skip the step. Technically, we're skipping to here. So we just have to write down the numerator, 23, and then one decimal place to the left for every zero in the denominator. So again, our decimal starts here for a whole number, and we need to move it over 3 spots. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so our new decimal is all the way over here, which means when we have a blank space like this, there's another 0. So this answer is just 0.0. Oops, sorry, my points don't really show up here. 0.023. All right, now let's look at converting decimals to fractions, so going the other way. So in order to do this, we need to write down the decimal divided by 1, then multiply both the top and bottom by 10 for every number after the decimal point. So for example, if there are 2 numbers after the decimal, then use 100. If there are 3, then use 1,000, etc. Okay, so again, very, very wordy, but all this is saying is to take whatever you have here. So in this case, we have 25, which has 2 decimal places. Okay, so like it says here, if there are 2 numbers after the decimal, then we're going to use 100. So this is just 25 over 100, which we know because we work with money all the time that is actually just 1/4. Okay, so this is even easier than the conversion we looked at before. Okay, next one here we have 0.777. So again, we're going to write that 777, but this time, okay, for 2 decimal points we had 2 zeros, so for 3 decimal points we need 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 777 over 1,000 is that fraction. So that one's pretty easy. So now let's work on converting percents to decimals. So all we need to do here is drop the percent sign and move the decimal 2 places to the left. Super easy. So drop the percent, so we have 79, and then we're just going to take our original decimal, which is always at the end, and move it 2 places to the left. 1, 2. So there's our new decimal point there. 0.79. Converting decimals to percent. So all we have to do for this is move the decimal 2 places to the right and add the percent sign, right? Because these are just opposites of each other. So we're going to drop the decimal, move the decimal 2 places to the right. So 1, 2, and add a percent sign. So if I move that 2 over, that's actually just 4.5%. Okay, very, very easy. Converting a percent to a fraction. So in order to do that, we need to write the value as a fraction over 100 and remove the percent sign and obviously reduce the lowest term. So literally, again, very, very easy. 45% is the same as 45 over 100. Okay, and then we can reduce that. These will both divide by 5. So we can reduce this fraction to 9 over 20. Okay, and the last one here, converting a fraction to a percent. So first convert fraction to a decimal, then convert decimal to percent. So it's telling us to go fraction to decimal, which is just above it, right? So first fraction to decimal, then decimal to percent. Okay, so we're just combining those 2 steps above. So the first thing is 2 fraction to decimal. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do fraction to decimal, which is all the way up here, not over here. Fraction to decimal. Okay, so that's what we did up here. So we need to write it over 100. So in order to write it over 100, we're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 20, because 5 times 20 is going to give us 100, and 4 times 20 will give us 80. Okay, so now we can convert from a decimal to a percent, which is just this one here. So this is 0.80, right? Because we just have to get rid of the 100 and move our decimal 2 spots over. And then to get that into a percent, which you could basically skip this middle step here, we can just drop the 100. So this is 80%. And again, I know that was like a kind of a confusing process for such a simple thing. So if you don't need all of that work for any of these, don't worry too much about it, but obviously know how to go from fractions to decimals and percents and vice versa, as well as your operations with fractions.